"Officer, you should call your supervisor before you make this decision for him." The black woman standing beside the restricted judicial entrance did not raise her voice, but something in the calmness of the warning made Officer Daniel Mercer look at her more sharply. Morning traffic moved along the avenue behind the State Judicial Center, and the broad stone plaza reflected the pale sunlight between courthouse columns. Daniel stood between Evelyn Carter and the secured entrance, one hand resting near his radio, his dark navy uniform crisp, his expression already hardened by the assumption that she did not belong there. "Ma'am, this area is not for the public," he said. Evelyn held a leather portfolio against her side. She wore a charcoal business suit, low black heels, and no visible robe, badge, or security detail. "I know," she answered. Daniel glanced toward the glass doors behind him, then used the public entrance on the other side of the building. "This is the entrance I am authorized to use." Officer Ethan Cole stood several feet away near a patrol vehicle, his body camera recording the exchange. Daniel noticed Evelyn look briefly toward the camera. "Do you have an appointment?" he asked. "I have business inside." "That was not my question." Evelyn met his eyes. "And I answered the question that matters for access." Daniel gave a short breath through his nose. People cannot just decide they belong at a restricted entrance because they say so. Evelyn remained still. "Then verify my authorization." She reached into her portfolio and produced a judicial access card. Daniel looked at it, then at her face, then back at the card. Less than 2 minutes earlier, a white male attorney in a gray suit had approached the same entrance, exchanged a familiar greeting with Daniel, flashed identification, and walked through without being asked where he was going or why he belonged there. Evelyn had seen it. Ethan had seen it too. Daniel turned the card over in his hand. "This does not mean you can enter through here." "It means exactly that." His jaw tightened. "You seem very certain." "Because I am." Evelyn glanced toward the courthouse doors. "If you are uncertain, call courthouse security." Daniel held onto the card. "I do not need courthouse security to tell me who is supposed to come through my post." Ethan shifted slightly. The small red light on his camera remained steady. Evelyn's eyes returned to Daniel. "Then call your supervisor." He stared at her. "Why?" "Because you are making a decision you may want documented by someone above you." Daniel laughed once, without humor. "You planning to get me in trouble?" "No. I am giving you an opportunity to follow the procedure available to you." The answer seemed to irritate him more than an argument would have. "You walk up here, tell me how to do my job, refuse the public entrance, and expect me to believe you have some special right to be back here." Evelyn did not react to the word special. "I expect you to verify the identification in your hand." For a moment, neither of them moved. The courthouse doors opened behind Daniel and closed again. A delivery truck rolled past the curb. Somewhere across the plaza, a radio crackled. Daniel looked at Evelyn from head to toe, then back at the access card. "Ma'am, step away from the entrance." Evelyn's expression changed only slightly. Not fear. Recognition. She had reached the point where explanation was no longer changing anything. "Officer Mercer," she said, reading his nameplate carefully. "Is your body camera active?" Ethan answered before Daniel could. "Mine is, ma'am." Daniel turned toward him. "Cole, stay out of this." Evelyn looked past Daniel toward the far edge of the plaza. 2 people in dark business suits were moving quickly toward them now, a black man and a white woman, both focused entirely on the encounter. Daniel noticed them too. "Friends of yours?" he asked. Evelyn looked back at him. "You should make that call now." Daniel squared his shoulders. "Nobody is coming through this entrance until I say so." The 2 strangers kept approaching. Evelyn said nothing more. She did not need to. Within seconds, Daniel Mercer was going to learn that the woman he had decided did not belong at the judicial entrance was one of the people the entire building existed to serve. 30 minutes earlier, Evelyn Carter had been finishing breakfast in a quiet hotel dining room 3 blocks from the State Judicial Center. Nothing about the scene suggested that she was one of the most powerful legal figures in the state. She wore a charcoal business suit over a cream blouse, carried a leather portfolio, and drank the last of her coffee while reviewing a small stack of documents at the corner of the table. Across the room, Marcus Reed and Laura Bennett sat separately, close enough to watch every entrance but far enough away to preserve the ordinary appearance Evelyn preferred whenever circumstances allowed. Marcus was a black judicial protection officer in a dark suit, broad-shouldered, alert, and professionally discreet. Laura, A white judicial protection officer, wore a navy suit, and kept one hand near her phone as she monitored the lobby. Evelyn closed the top folder and checked the time. 8:42 in the morning. The state Supreme Court conference would not begin for more than an hour. Marcus approached only after she stood. Justice Carter, the vehicle is ready at the south entrance. Evelyn looked through the dining room window toward the courthouse district. The morning was mild, barely 70 degrees Fahrenheit, and the sky above the downtown buildings was clear. I am going to walk. Marcus paused. It is 3 blocks. I know. Laura joined them. We can keep the vehicle close. Evelyn slipped the documents into her portfolio. Keep it available, but give me some distance. Marcus understood the tone. How much? 30 or 40 feet. Enough that I can cross a public plaza without looking like a parade. Laura smiled faintly. Understood. Evelyn was not careless about security. She had spent too many years in public service to confuse independence with recklessness. But she disliked the invisible wall that often formed around officials once enough people began treating their titles as identities. She wanted to see the courthouse entrance the way attorneys, clerks, staff members, and visitors saw it. More importantly, she wanted to observe a system that had recently generated complaints about inconsistent access screening. Inside her portfolio, beneath a set of case briefs, rested a sealed folder prepared by the Administrative Office of the Courts. It contained summaries of concerns involving courthouse security, police coordination, and unequal treatment at restricted entrances. Some complaints described black attorneys and court employees being questioned longer than white colleagues with comparable credentials. Others were less clear. Evelyn had not reached conclusions. That was the point. Her phone vibrated as she stepped onto the sidewalk. A message from Chief Justice Robert Whitmore appeared on the screen. He reminded her that the afternoon meeting on judicial access policy had been moved to 2 o'clock. Evelyn replied that she had seen the update, then slid the phone into her bag. Marcus and Laura followed at the agreed distance. On the walk toward the State Judicial Center, Evelyn passed office workers carrying coffee, attorneys hurrying toward hearings, and city employees unloading boxes from a van. Nobody stopped to look at her. Nobody recognized the authority concealed behind ordinary business clothes. That anonymity suited her. At the corner opposite the courthouse plaza, she paused for the traffic signal and watched the judicial entrance across the street. A white male attorney in a gray suit approached the restricted door. A uniformed officer glanced at his identification, exchanged a few familiar words, and waved him through almost immediately. Evelyn noticed the interaction, then started across when the signal changed. Marcus and Laura remained behind her. The officer at the entrance turned toward Evelyn as she approached. His expression changed before she reached the first stone step. Evelyn noticed that too. The white attorney had been through the restricted entrance in less than 30 seconds. Evelyn Carter knew because she had watched the entire exchange while waiting at the crosswalk. Officer Daniel Mercer had recognized the man, glanced at his identification, shared a brief comment about the morning, and stepped aside without asking where he was going, whom he was meeting, or why he believed he belonged there. By the time Evelyn reached the first stone step of the State Judicial Center, the attorney was already inside. Daniel turned toward her before she reached the door. His expression was different now. The easy familiarity was gone. Public entrance is around the east side, he said. Evelyn stopped several feet from him. Good morning. Daniel did not return the greeting. Did you hear me? I did. Then you need to use the public entrance. Evelyn held her leather portfolio against her side. I am authorized to enter here. Daniel looked at her suit, then at the portfolio, then toward the street behind her, as if searching for some explanation that would make the claim more believable. Do you have an appointment in the building? I have official business inside. What department? Evelyn studied him for a moment. Why is that necessary for entry if I can provide valid access identification? Daniel's mouth tightened. Because this is a secured entrance. I understand that. Then answer the question. Several yards away, Officer Ethan Cole stood near a patrol vehicle, his body camera facing the entrance. Marcus Reed and Laura Bennett remained across the plaza at the distance Evelyn had requested, watching without moving closer. Daniel could not have known who they were. He seemed more interested in proving Evelyn wrong than in verifying anything she said. What department? He repeated. Evelyn answered carefully. Judicial offices. Daniel gave a short, skeptical look. Which office? The one my credential authorizes me to enter. That is not how this works. Evelyn glanced toward the door the white attorney had just used. The gentleman before me was not asked which office he worked in. Daniel's expression sharpened. I know him. So familiarity changes the screening process? Do not twist what I said. I repeated what happened. Ethan shifted slightly near the patrol vehicle. Daniel noticed, but kept his attention on Evelyn. Do you have identification or not? Evelyn opened her portfolio and removed a judicial access card. She held it out without comment. Daniel took it and examined the front, then the back, then the front again. This does not look like the regular employee credential. Because it is not an employee credential. Then what is it? A judicial access credential. Daniel looked at her. You expect me to accept that because you said it? No. I expect you to verify it through courthouse security. She nodded toward the communication station just inside the glass doors. They can confirm it in less than a minute. Daniel kept the card. You seem very familiar with what courthouse security can do. I am familiar with the building. That does not mean you belong behind that door. Evelyn did not respond immediately. The wording mattered. Not whether her credential was valid. Not whether access control could confirm it. Whether she belonged. She looked at Daniel's nameplate, then at Ethan's camera. Officer Mercer, is there a specific problem with the credential? There is a problem with the whole situation. What situation? You show up alone. You do not use the public entrance. You give me a card I do not recognize. And then you start telling me how security works. Evelyn's voice remained level. I showed you valid identification and provided a method to verify it. Daniel glanced again at the access card. People who are supposed to be back here usually do not have to explain themselves this much. Evelyn looked toward the door, then back at him. I did not choose how much explanation you demanded. For the first time, Ethan looked directly at Daniel instead of the entrance. The difference in treatment was no longer subtle. Daniel had spent less than half a minute with the white attorney. Evelyn had now answered question after question, yet the available verification process still had not been used. Daniel handed nothing back. Instead, he stepped slightly closer to the door, making his position clear. Ma'am, you are not going through here until I am satisfied you belong. Evelyn's expression remained composed, but something in her eyes changed. She was no longer trying to convince him. She was beginning to observe him. Daniel Mercer kept Evelyn Carter's judicial access card in his hand and looked at her as though the document had created more suspicion instead of less. The courthouse plaza remained busy around them, but the space between the two of them had narrowed into something quiet and uncomfortable. Evelyn stood beside the secured entrance with her leather portfolio against her side, her posture straight, her face composed. Officer Ethan Cole remained several yards away near the patrol vehicle, body camera still recording. Across the plaza, Marcus Reed and Laura Bennett had stopped pretending the exchange was routine. They were still keeping their distance, but both were watching Daniel carefully now. You said this is a judicial credential, Daniel said. It is. Yet you are not wearing a court badge. The credential in your hand is the authorization. Daniel turned it over again. People like you do not just walk through here. Evelyn's eyes settled on him. People like me? For the first time, Daniel seemed to hear his own words. His expression tightened. People without visible authorization. Evelyn looked briefly at the card he was holding. You are holding my authorization. I am holding something you handed me. Then verify it. Daniel took a small step toward the secured door, positioning himself more clearly between Evelyn and the entrance. You keep saying that like I work for you. I am asking you to use the procedure available to every officer assigned to this post. And I am telling you I know how this post works. Evelyn's voice remained measured. Then you know courthouse security can confirm the credential. Ethan shifted his weight. Daniel glanced toward him, then back at Evelyn. You seem very interested in telling police officers what they should do. Only when the answer is already part of the procedure. Daniel gave a short laugh. What are you, an attorney? Evelyn did not answer immediately. Would that change whether the credential is valid? It might explain the attitude. Evelyn's face remained still, but the remark did not pass unnoticed. What attitude? The way you walked up here expecting special treatment. I watched another person use this entrance less than a minute before I arrived. Daniel's jaw tightened. I already told you. I know him. And you do not know me. Exactly. Evelyn nodded slowly. So instead of verifying me, you decided I did not belong. Daniel lifted the card slightly. I decided you needed additional screening. Based on what? The circumstances. Which circumstances? He hesitated. The rental vehicle was not relevant because she had arrived on foot. Her clothing was professional. Her identification was in his hand. Her authorization could be confirmed with a single call. Evelyn waited. Daniel finally said, "You approached a restricted judicial entrance without an escort, without visible court identification, and expected to walk through because you said you were authorized." I presented identification, not one I recognize. Recognition and validity are not the same thing. Daniel's expression hardened again. You really enjoy correcting people. I am trying to give you a way to resolve this accurately. I do not need a lesson. Then call courthouse security. Daniel looked toward the communication station visible through the glass doors. The solution was perhaps 20 feet away. One radio transmission. One credential number. One confirmation. Evelyn could see that he knew it. She could also see that using it now would require him to admit he might have been wrong. "No," he said. Evelyn's eyes narrowed slightly. "No. You can use the public entrance and let screening handle you there. My credential authorizes this entrance. I am not accepting it." "On what basis?" Daniel returned the card halfway toward her, then stopped. "On the basis that I am responsible for who gets through this door." Evelyn looked at the card between them. "Responsibility does not eliminate procedure. And procedure does not require me to ignore my judgment." The words hung in the air. Ethan looked from Daniel to Evelyn. Marcus and Laura began walking again, closing the distance across the plaza. Evelyn noticed them but did not signal. She looked directly at Daniel. "Officer Mercer, I am asking you once more to verify my access through courthouse security." Daniel shook his head. "I have made my decision." Evelyn's expression changed. "Not anger. Finality. Then make sure your supervisor knows you made it." Daniel stared at her. He still believed the most important question was whether Evelyn Carter belonged. Behind that door, he had not yet realized that the more important question was why he had been so determined not to find out. Evelyn Carter stopped trying to prove that she belonged at the entrance. That was the change Daniel Mercer did not recognize at first. Until that moment, she had answered his questions, explained the credential, offered a verification method, and given him every reasonable opportunity to resolve the situation through procedure. Now she simply looked at him, then at the access card still in his hand, and opened her leather portfolio. Daniel watched her remove a small notebook and pen. "What are you doing?" he asked. Evelyn wrote down the time, documenting the contact. His expression hardened. "You planning to file a complaint?" "I am planning to preserve what happened." Officer Ethan Cole remained several yards away with his body camera recording. Evelyn turned slightly toward him. "Officer Cole, is your camera active?" Ethan nodded. "Yes, ma'am." Daniel looked back at him. "Cole, I told you to stay out of this." Evelyn wrote another line. "Was it recording when I approached the entrance?" Ethan answered carefully. "Yes, ma'am." "And when the gentleman before me entered?" Ethan hesitated only a moment. "Yes." Daniel shifted his weight. "Why does that matter?" Evelyn looked at him. "Because sequence matters." She glanced at his nameplate. "Your full name is Daniel Mercer? You can read." Evelyn did not react. "I am confirming it." He exhaled sharply. "Daniel Mercer." She wrote it down. "Badge number. You do not need that. I am asking you to identify yourself during an official contact." Daniel gave a humorless laugh. "You suddenly think you are running an investigation?" Evelyn kept her voice even. "Badge number." Ethan looked toward Daniel. Daniel noticed. After a pause, he gave the number. Evelyn wrote it carefully. "Who is your immediate supervisor?" "Why?" "Because you declined to verify my credential and instructed me to leave an entrance I am authorized to use." "That is your version. Then your supervisor can review yours." Daniel's jaw tightened. "Sergeant Melissa Grant." Evelyn wrote the name. "Is Sergeant Grant currently on duty?" "Yes." "Good. Please call her." Daniel folded his arms. "I am not calling my supervisor because someone does not like being told no." Evelyn looked directly at him. "I am not asking because I dislike your answer. I am asking because you refused the verification process while holding valid identification." Daniel lifted the card again. "You keep calling it valid." "Because it is." "You think knowing procedure makes you a lawyer?" For the first time, the smallest hint of dry humor touched Evelyn's expression. "Something like that." Ethan looked away for half a second, as though suppressing a reaction. Daniel did not smile. "What exactly are you accusing me of?" Evelyn closed the notebook halfway. "I have not accused you of anything." "Then why write all this down?" Because accurate records are useful when people disagree about what happened. She opened the notebook again. What is the exact reason you are denying me access through this entrance? Daniel answered immediately. You have not established that you belong here. That is a conclusion. I asked for the reason. He stared at her. Your credential is unfamiliar. You arrived without an escort. You refused to use the public entrance. I arrived with a credential you chose not to verify. Daniel looked toward the card in his hand, but said nothing. Evelyn continued. Is there any other reason? My judgment. Please be specific. I do not have to justify every security decision to you. Evelyn's eyes settled on him. You may have to justify it to someone. Across the plaza, Marcus Reed and Laura Bennett had closed the distance considerably. They were no longer 30 or 40 feet away. Marcus walked with measured purpose, his expression focused and controlled. Laura kept one hand near her phone, speaking quietly into an earpiece as she approached. Daniel noticed them and turned. Those people with you? Evelyn did not look away from him. They are approaching because this contact has lasted longer than expected. Tell them to stop where they are. Evelyn said nothing. Marcus and Laura continued forward. Daniel stepped slightly away from the entrance and raised his voice just enough to carry. Across the plaza. Sir. Ma'am. Stay back. Marcus slowed, but he did not stop completely. Laura's eyes moved from Daniel to Evelyn, checking her condition without dramatics. Evelyn remained calm. Daniel looked between them. I said stay back. Marcus reached inside his suit jacket, not hurriedly, and removed a credential wallet. Daniel's confidence flickered for the first time. Evelyn closed her notebook. She had spent several minutes giving him opportunities to verify who she was. Now someone else was about to do it for him. Marcus Reed stopped a few feet from Daniel Mercer and opened the credential wallet just enough for the identification inside to be clearly visible. His voice was calm, controlled, and professional. Judicial Protection Division. Daniel looked at the credential, then at Marcus, then toward Laura Bennett, who had moved slightly to the side to keep a clear view of Evelyn Carter and the entrance. Laura spoke quietly into her radio. Primary is secure. Contact ongoing at the South Judicial entrance. Daniel's expression changed. Primary. Marcus did not answer the question. Officer Mercer, step away from Justice Carter. The words seemed to remove every other sound from the plaza. Daniel stared at him. Justice who? Marcus held the credential steady. Justice Evelyn Carter. Ethan Cole's eyes moved immediately toward Evelyn. Daniel did the same. Evelyn remained exactly where she had been standing, leather portfolio at her side, expression composed, posture unchanged. She had not become more important in that moment. Daniel had simply learned what he had refused to verify. You are telling me she is a judge? He asked. Marcus replied. I am telling you she is an associate justice of the state Supreme Court, and you are currently holding her judicial access credential. Daniel looked down at the card in his hand, as if seeing it for the first time. Laura stepped closer, but remained several feet away from him. Please return the credential, Officer Mercer. Daniel did not move immediately. I need to confirm this. Evelyn finally spoke. That is what I asked you to do several minutes ago. Daniel looked at her. Why did you not just say you were a Supreme Court justice? I told you I was authorized to use this entrance. I gave you a valid credential. I told you exactly how to verify it. That is not the same as telling me who you are. It should not have needed to be. Ethan lowered his eyes for a moment, then looked back toward Daniel. Marcus remained still, making no attempt to crowd him or take the card from his hand. Officer Mercer, he said, return the credential and contact your supervisor. Daniel's face tightened. I am not taking orders from courthouse security. Laura answered evenly. Then take the same advice from the person who already asked you to call Sergeant Melissa Grant. Daniel looked from Laura to Evelyn. The confidence he had carried through the entire encounter was beginning to break apart, not because anyone threatened him, but because every choice he had made was now being seen in a different light. He reached toward Evelyn and returned the access card. She accepted it without comment and placed it back inside her portfolio. At that moment, a voice came from behind Daniel. Officer Mercer. He turned. Sergeant Melissa Grant was crossing the plaza from the courthouse security station, walking quickly but without urgency. Daniel looked surprised. Sergeant. Melissa's attention went first to Evelyn, and recognition appeared almost immediately. Justice Carter, are you all right? Evelyn nodded. I am fine. Melissa looked at Daniel. What happened? Daniel started speaking quickly. She approached the restricted entrance with a credential I did not recognize. She would not use the public entrance, and I was trying to determine whether she had valid access. Evelyn said nothing. Ethan's camera continued recording. Marcus and Laura remained beside her. Melissa looked toward Ethan. Was your body camera running? Yes, Sergeant. From before Justice Carter approached. Melissa's eyes sharpened. Before? Ethan nodded. It also recorded the attorney who entered immediately before her. Daniel glanced toward him. Melissa noticed. All right. Nobody deletes anything. Preserve the entire recording. Daniel exhaled. Sergeant, I was doing my job. Melissa's expression stayed neutral. Then the recording will show that. Evelyn watched Daniel carefully. He had spent the last several minutes asking why she belonged at the entrance. Now, for the first time, he seemed to understand that the question was no longer about her access. It was about his judgment. Sergeant Melissa Grant looked from Daniel Mercer to Evelyn Carter, then toward Marcus Reed and Laura Bennett, standing nearby. Her expression changed the moment she understood who was in front of her. Justice Carter, are you all right? Evelyn nodded once. I am fine, Sergeant. Daniel stared at Melissa. You know her? Melissa turned toward him slowly. Yes, Daniel. I know who she is. The words seemed to land harder than anything Marcus had said. Daniel looked back at Evelyn, searching her face for some sign that this was an elaborate misunderstanding, but she remained composed, almost painfully calm. Ethan Cole's body camera continued recording from several feet away. The courthouse plaza was still moving around them. Attorneys crossing toward hearings, employees entering side doors, traffic passing along the avenue. But Daniel seemed suddenly unaware of everything except the woman he had stopped. Melissa stepped closer to him. Give me a summary. Daniel tried to recover his professional tone. She approached the restricted entrance without visible court identification. She presented a credential I did not recognize. I told her to use the public entrance while I assessed the situation. Evelyn did not interrupt. Melissa looked at the access door, then at Daniel. Did she ask you to verify the credential? He hesitated. She mentioned courthouse security. Once. Daniel said nothing. Ethan answered carefully. More than once, Sergeant. Daniel turned toward him. Melissa raised one hand. Let him speak. Ethan continued. Justice Carter also asked Officer Mercer to call a supervisor. Melissa looked back at Daniel. And you did not. I believed I could handle it. Melissa's face remained professional, but disappointment entered her eyes. That is not the same as following verification procedure. Daniel glanced toward Evelyn again. I did not know who she was. Evelyn finally spoke. That should not have been necessary. Daniel frowned. You keep saying that, but if you had simply told me you were a justice, this would have ended immediately. Evelyn held his gaze. I told you how to verify me. You chose not to. Silence followed. Marcus remained several feet away, giving Evelyn space now that Melissa had taken control of the contact. Laura lowered her radio but stayed alert. Daniel looked toward the courthouse entrance as though trying to find something stable in a situation that had shifted beneath him. His eyes moved upward to the bronze directory mounted beside the secured doors. The names of the state Supreme Court justices were displayed there in formal lettering. Near the center was one name he had somehow failed to connect to the woman standing 10 feet away. Evelyn Carter, Associate Justice, State Supreme Court. Daniel stared at it for several seconds. Then he looked back at her. The title was no longer something Marcus had told him. It was written on the building he had been assigned to protect. Justice Carter, he said, quieter now. I apologize for the confusion. Evelyn's expression did not change. Was it confusion? Daniel looked uncertain. I was trying to make a security decision. Then let us examine the decision. She turned toward Ethan. Officer Cole, your recording began before the attorney entered? Yes, Justice Carter. And continued through this entire contact. Yes. Evelyn looked toward Melissa. Then please preserve it. Melissa nodded. I will. Daniel exhaled. You are making this sound like I targeted you. Evelyn shook her head. I am not making it sound like anything. The recording will show what happened. Melissa looked toward the exterior camera mounted above the entrance. We also have courthouse security footage. Evelyn followed her gaze. Preserve that too. Daniel's confidence weakened further. So this becomes an investigation because I did not recognize a credential? Evelyn answered calmly. No. It becomes a review because one person was allowed through in less than a minute, another was questioned repeatedly, verification was available, and you decided not to use it. Daniel looked again at the directory beside the door. He had spent the morning deciding who belonged at that entrance. Now the building itself was telling him that the black woman he had doubted was one of the people whose name had been carved into its authority long before he ever saw her. Evelyn Carter opened the sealed folder she had carried from the hotel that morning and placed it on the conference table inside the State Judicial Center. Less than an hour had passed since Daniel Mercer stopped her at the restricted entrance, but the atmosphere around him had changed completely. Sergeant Melissa Grant sat beside him. Officer Ethan Cole remained near the wall, and Marcus Reed and Laura Bennett stood quietly behind Evelyn while the first preserved security images appeared on a monitor. Daniel looked at the folder. "What is that?" Evelyn removed the first document. "The reason I came early today." Melissa turned toward her. Evelyn continued. "For the past several months, the court administration has been reviewing complaints involving courthouse access, coordination between police officers and judicial security, and unequal treatment during screening." Daniel's expression tightened. "This was already an investigation?" "No," Evelyn said. "It was a policy review." She looked directly at him. "You were not the reason it began." That seemed to give him a moment of relief. Then she added, "But what happened this morning may now be relevant to it." Ethan looked toward the monitor. The first video sequence showed the white attorney approaching the entrance before Evelyn. Daniel greeted him, glanced at his identification, and allowed him through quickly. A timestamp remained visible in the corner. The next sequence showed Evelyn arriving less than a minute later. The conversation continued. Questions accumulated. Verification was suggested. Verification was declined. Daniel watched himself on the screen without speaking. Melissa looked at him. "How long was the first contact?" Ethan checked the preserved timeline. "About 27 seconds. And Justice Carter?" Ethan answered carefully. "More than 9 minutes before protection officers approached." Daniel leaned back. "That does not automatically mean anything." "I knew the attorney." Evelyn nodded. "Correct. That fact belongs in the record too." She turned another page. "The question is whether familiarity explains the entire difference, or whether other factors influence the level of suspicion." Daniel looked at the complaint summaries. "What other complaints?" Evelyn did not hand them to him immediately. "There are several reports from black attorneys, court employees, and visitors who describe being asked additional questions at entrances after presenting valid credentials." Melissa's expression changed. "Were any of those connected to our department?" "Some involved courthouse security. Some involved police details assigned around the judicial district." Evelyn paused. "Officer Mercer's name appears in 2 prior service complaints." Daniel looked at her sharply. Two that require comparison with today's incident. Neither established misconduct on its own." "What did they say?" "One black attorney reported being questioned about why she was using a staff entrance after presenting a valid credential. Another black court employee reported being directed toward public screening until a supervisor recognized him." Daniel shook his head. "I do not remember either of those being sustained." "They were not sustained findings," Melissa said quietly. "They were service complaints." Evelyn nodded. "Which is why nobody should pretend they prove intent. But patterns are often invisible when every event is examined in isolation." The room became quiet. Daniel looked back at the monitor, where his interaction with Evelyn had been frozen at the moment he held her access card, but refused to call courthouse security. "So what happens now?" he asked. Evelyn closed the folder halfway. "The body camera recording is preserved. Exterior courthouse video is preserved. Entry logs will be compared. The prior complaints will be reviewed under the same standards. Your department will have the opportunity to respond. So will courthouse security." Daniel looked at Melissa. "Am I being removed from the post?" Melissa answered before Evelyn could. "Temporarily reassigned while the review is conducted." Daniel's face fell. "Because of one morning?" Evelyn looked at him calmly. "No, because one morning raised questions that should be answered with evidence." Daniel stared at the footage again. He had believed the worst moment of the day was learning that the woman he stopped was a state Supreme Court justice. He was wrong. The harder realization was that her title had not created the problem. It had only made sure the problem could no longer be ignored. 1 week later, the State Judicial Center looked exactly as it had the morning Evelyn Carter was stopped at the restricted entrance, but the people inside it were paying closer attention to things they had once considered routine. The review was still active. No final finding had been issued against Daniel Mercer, and Evelyn had insisted that nobody treat an allegation like a verdict. His department had temporarily reassigned him away from the courthouse district while investigators compared body camera footage, exterior security recordings, entry logs, supervisor reports, and the 2 earlier service complaints connected to his name. That morning, Evelyn entered the state Supreme Court chamber wearing her black judicial robe. Chief Justice Robert Whitmore stood near the bench reviewing the day's schedule, while court staff moved quietly through the room. Marcus Reed and Laura Bennett remained farther back, present but unobtrusive. Evelyn took her place with the same composed expression she had carried outside the courthouse a week earlier. The robe changed how strangers looked at her. It changed how people addressed her. It changed the responsibilities she carried when she sat above the courtroom. But it had not changed who she was on the plaza when Daniel decided her word, her credential, and the available verification process were not enough. Later that afternoon, Daniel asked Sergeant Melissa Grant whether he could speak with Evelyn briefly. Melissa passed the request through the proper channels. Evelyn agreed. They met in a small conference room near the administrative offices. Daniel entered without the confidence he had shown at the entrance. He was still in uniform, but his courthouse assignment badge was no longer attached to his outer vest. Evelyn sat at the table with the sealed review folder closed in front of her. "Justice Carter," Daniel began, "I know the investigation is not finished." "It is not." He nodded. "I have replayed that morning in my head 100 times." Evelyn waited. "I should have verified the credential." "Yes." "I should have called Sergeant Grant when you asked." "Yes." Daniel looked down briefly. "And I should not have assumed you were in the wrong place." Evelyn said nothing. He continued, "I do not want one bad morning to erase 15 years of police work." Her voice remained measured. "A fair review does not erase anything. It examines everything." Daniel looked at her. "If I had known who you were, I would have treated you differently." Evelyn became completely still. "That is the sentence you need to think about." Daniel frowned slightly. "I mean, I would have understood the situation." "No," Evelyn said calmly. "You would have respected the title." Silence filled the room. The white attorney before me did not need to be a Supreme Court justice to receive a routine verification. I should not have needed to be one either. Daniel's expression tightened with discomfort, but he did not argue. Evelyn continued, "You were not required to recognize my face. You were not required to know my position. You were required to apply the same procedure with the same professionalism." Daniel looked toward the closed folder. "What happens if the review finds I handled other people differently? Then your department decides what accountability requires. Training, reassignment, discipline, if supported by the evidence. The purpose is not humiliation. Then what is the purpose?" Evelyn looked directly at him. "To make sure the next person does not need a powerful title before someone decides they deserve fairness." Daniel nodded slowly. When the conversation ended, Evelyn walked back toward the courthouse chamber. Marcus and Laura followed at their usual distance. She passed the same restricted entrance where the encounter had begun. A young black attorney approached with an access credential. The officer on duty checked it, confirmed one detail through courthouse security, returned it, and opened the door. No suspicion beyond procedure. No unnecessary questions. No special treatment. Just consistency. Evelyn watched for a moment, then continued inside. Her bodyguards had revealed her title in seconds. Daniel's own camera had revealed something more important, how he treated her before the title mattered. Justice wore a robe inside the courtroom, but that morning on the plaza, it had worn nothing but dignity.